What's going on, Lab Pack family? Prince of George here, back with another episode in the Lions and Bears Lab podcast series in no particular order. This is episode 5, picking up where we left off in episode 4, revolving around training. And as I already elaborated on, if we're honest, we've been training our entire lives leading up to our purpose, or at least that should be the case. And I started to talk about in the last episode how playing sports had trained me for another moment in my life, which was high school. And getting out of high school was a great challenge, but using the info that I had already gathered when it came to having a team around me, I used that, and I had the right team around me, and lo and behold, I graduated high school. Now, here's where it sets up a different conversation, because by the hair on my chin, I barely passed high school. I mean, it was so bad to where I was literally when everybody was doing grad week, I was in the office doing makeup tests from years back. And it was just so crazy because all the faculty was like, "You okay, man? You go make it?" I go, "I don't know. I don't even know." It was so bad to where I was supposed to take a foreign language, and I brought it up. I was trying to be honest, like, "Hey, I didn't even take foreign language." They're like, "Don't even worry about it. Just get on up out of here." And so I completed all the tests, and they said I graduated, but they didn't give me the piece of paper. And so for the longest, I didn't even really know if I graduated or not. But a couple weeks later, got the certificate in the mail, and I became an official high school graduate. Yet that sets up, for me, another stage of my life, because I went to college after high school. Now, here's the challenge that I ran into when it comes to college. I mean, there are a lot of challenges that I ran into. I mean, I had the team aspect. I knew that I needed a team around me. And I went to school originally for textile design, which is a small knit group of the greater fashion industry. And so the community that I built around me was perfect for me. And I think that was totally from God. And yet my challenge was, when it comes to college, I hadn't really worked hard for anything up until that point in my life. And I knew that if I was going to get out of college, I would have to really work hard. Nothing came natural, if you will, for myself. Talent wasn't going to get me through this concept of college. And it was intense because textile design is awesome, but it's very technical. Once you get past the fine art aspect of the design process, you now have to scan things into the computer, and you're dealing with measurements, and there's times where I'm up all night trying to get patterns to repeat properly. I mean, let alone sometimes I'm up all night painting or whatever the medium that I'm using, color, pencil, etc. And then you got to scan it into the computer. That's a completely different process. So I knew right off the bat that it was going to be very, very challenging. Now, here's where training comes in retrospect. I was learning and I was building the character, being trained in a sense, to start something and to finish something, even though it was going to be hard and difficult. Because like I said, up until that point in my life, there was nothing I really did long term that was difficult and or hard. And it's a little different when you're paying for it. It was pretty expensive. Thank you to everybody that co-signed for my first couple of loans. Amen. We love you. But It was such a beautiful thing, because once you get acclimated to a workload and or accustomed to something being hard, you get a little more familiar with it. And again, I wouldn't say in the moment that I was being trained, but I knew college was going to be challenging for me, and I ultimately embraced it. Fast forward to me graduating with my AA in design, textile design. I knew that coming out of that degree, there was more that I wanted to do. I couldn't solely be glued to a computer for too long, because I missed that human interaction. I got to talk to somebody. This is lonely. It was lonely being a designer. And so the challenge was my credits, they couldn't really transfer. My grades were decent, but my credits couldn't transfer over to a traditional college. So I had to stay there at the Fashion Institute, and they were offering a business program at that time. And so I go, business sounds good. I can be around people. Maybe I can go into business for myself, because I knew at least the textile design aspect of the fashion industry, it wasn't going to be for me, and that's for another day, another story. You got to figure out what you're passionate about. And for me, it was the human interaction aspect, really affecting people with my personality, which I kind of already elaborated on. And so I ultimately went back for business. And textile design versus business, two totally different animals, if you will, two totally different challenges. But the beauty is, I already knew it was going to be challenging. I knew college was going to be challenging. And so I walked into that program knowing and understanding that it was going to be hard. So I already walked into it embracing the challenge. And it didn't make it any easier, but it did make learning that much more enjoyable. It made it much more enjoyable. And I ended up graduating from that degree a couple years later with a pretty decent GPA. It wasn't great. Definitely could have been better. I got off to a rocky start, but somewhere around 3-point-ish something. Maybe it was a 3.0 on the dot. Don't quote me. But coming from high school to where I didn't work hard for anything, and going to college a couple years later with 2 degrees to show for being trained, kudos. Kudos to the process, not to myself, but to the process of being trained. Fast forward to me on the tail end of the business degree, it's where, and I'd already been involved with the church at this point, talked a little bit about that story already, and it was around this time to where the ministry college was being brought to my attention. And for me, I go, man, I just got out of school. If you count high school, I just did 8 years of school straight. No break. I took a small mini summer break from high school to college, but boom, straight shot all the way through. At least that's what I told myself. And I go, man, can I really do a couple more years in school? And unfortunately, I was looking at ministry college in the wrong light. I wasn't looking at it as an opportunity to be trained in order to become a better minister. Unfortunately, at that point, that's just where I was. But I did take that mindset from secular college and from the Fashion Institute. I took that into ministry college. So I knew that if I was going to do it, then I would have to start it and finish it and learn how to give it, if you will, my whole entire heart. And for the first 6 months, it was very challenging because I was looking at ministry in the wrong light. But again, I've already told this story. When it finally lined up for me and when it clicked, I go, this is the best opportunity to be trained to become a better minister. Now, don't get me wrong, nothing replaces on the job experience and training. The best way is to do it. But you do get to grow in knowledge and confidence in the knowledge of ministry as you're being taught something that you don't know per se for the first time. And it was a great experience for myself. And I ended up graduating a little earlier than expected because my wife and myself, which I am going to get to in a second, it's going to carry over into marriage. Being trained in college bleeds over to marriage, which is kind of the next milestone in my life. But I graduated a little early because we ended up going on the mission field. And so I highlight that segment in my life because for the first time, I understood that if I was going to do something challenging and hard, I'd have to start it, finish it, give it my whole heart. And there are obviously other things that I was trained in when it comes to college, but it's a huge aspect for me that would pay dividends later on in my life, which I'll get to a little later. See you next episode. Much love. I'm out.